The day Peter returned to Fada Island, the river was in a forgiving mood. It lay flat and glassy like a giant calabash of palm wine, only shivering when a canoe scratched its surface, or when a silver fish dared to leap and stitch a brief seam with its tail. The flood had withdrawn only a week before, leaving behind shiny mud, fresh scars on tree trunks, and the smell of wet earth that sneaked into nostrils and stayed there like a stubborn memory. Mangroves had shed their dark secrets, lost gourds, driftwood thrones, a boy's single sandal. Fada, with its raffia-roofed houses and beaten red earth lanes, had reset to its old rhythm. Smokehouses warming up, paddle songs returning, and gossip learning to walk again. Peter came home on a plank-seated canoe that hummed beneath the weight of his mother's prayers. He had left for secondary school a boy with legs like broomsticks and come back tall, with shoulders squared by city noise and textbooks. His father, Pa Ebikabo, had insisted he return to feel river in his lungs again, not only chalk dust in his head. His mother, Mama Ebikabo, whose laughter could set the market yam sellers tapping their pestles faster, had sent word ahead for someone to meet him at the landing. That someone was Perez, his childhood friend, and a walking drum of mischief. Peter boy. Perez leaped from the dock and landed with a splash that made a sleeping egret startle into the air. See your cheeks. City has polished you like smoked catfish. Peter laughed, stepping onto the dock with the pause of someone measuring whether the ground still remembers his weight. Perez, you're the same, he said, sweeping him into a hug. Only your head is bigger. Wisdom, Perez replied, tapping his temple. I have been collecting it while you were busy collecting English. They carried Peter's trunk, metallic blue, the kind that knows many roads, past rows of coiled nets drying like lazy pythons, past the smokehouses where women with tied wrappers and strong hands fanned smoldering fires beneath racks of fish. The scent was rich and unapologetic. Boys ran past them with paddles balanced on their shoulders, singing a teasing chorus about a girl who cooked soup without salt and expected compliments. Tonight we pound fresh Gary and you eat like a Ritterney, Perez announced. Tomorrow you remember how to paddle. The fish have been missing you. Have they? Peter asked, shading his eyes to watch a canoe glide by, its hull a darker mirror on the water. He had missed this, the measured conversation of paddle and river. The way the horizon in Fada was a suggestion rather than a line. Perez sniffed, then leaned in conspiratorial. Or maybe they have been enjoying peace. But we must end the peace. It spoils them. At the Ebikabo compound, Peter's mother kissed the air around his face, as if afraid a real kiss would break something precious. His father simply squeezed his shoulder. In Fada, a squeeze from Pa Ebikabo was a poem. They ate late. Smoked bonga fish, boiled plantains, palm oil pepper warmed with the sly fire of Atarodo, and the house filled with the kind of silence only satisfied bellies can keep. When darkness took the paths and the frogs began their ragged orchestra, Peter lay awake listening to the village breathe. The city had been a ceaseless shout. Fada was a song that knew when to pause. By morning, he was up with the birds. Perez arrived chewing a sugar cane stem and humming, and together they lifted a light canoe from its cradle. The flood had left new channels cut into the banks. Perez pointed them out as a hunter points out old tracks. This one snakes to the lily pond, he said. This one goes past the snail grove to the wide bend where the river pretends to sleep. That bend has been swallowing hooks lately, so be humble when you greet it. And the people? Peter asked. Who has married, who has quarreled, who has converted? Perez grinned. People have done all three, sometimes in 1 week. He planted his paddle, and the canoe purred forward. Ah, and the beautiful Maltilda now rejects suitors with a special kind of poetry you have not seen. Maltilda? Peter tasted the name, familiar yet fresh. He remembered a girl who moved like the shadow of a palm frond, a suggestion, a flicker. She must be what, 18 by now? 18 and a half, and if you call her a village girl she will strike you with her eyes, Perez said. She speaks of Port Harcourt like it is heaven. White buildings, blue taxis, men who are city-sent and no grammar that can open doors. Doors to what? To her idea of freedom, Perez said. Her friend Stella is always dragging her down from the clouds, but Maltilda ties herself back with new rope. Peter laughed and let the paddle rest across his knees, the water licking the hull as if answering laughter with laughter. I want to see her, he said, as one says a small wish to the morning, expecting the day to smile at the courage of speaking it. You will, Perez replied. The river is generous to returnees. The generosity was not long in coming. At the wide bend that Perez had warned about, Where the river widened its chest and pretended to sleep, they saw two figures standing knee-deep near the reeds. They were casting a floor net the way old women throw blessings. Careful, repeated, believing something invisible answers the hand that asks. One of the figures wore a red headscarf, nodded with the authority of a person who knows her face is worth framing. The other, shorter, adjusted her wrapper every other minute, muttering and laughing like someone who argued with her own jokes. Perez nudged him. "Ask and it shall be given," he whispered. Matilda and Stella. Peter pretended not to hear. He steadied the canoe and watched. The red headscarf girl raised the heavy net and flicked it. It billowed over the water like a gray blossom, and then sank with small bubbles. She waited, wrists steady, lips set. Even from where he sat, Peter could see that her face was bragging and not apologizing for it. "Good morning," Perez called out with the unshy voice of a ferry conductor. "The river is smiling on you?" Stella looked up first. Her smile came easily, like a daughter of laughter. "It will smile when you boys stop chasing all the fish with your city cologne," she shouted back. "Who is that with you, Perez? Is that Peter or Peter's taller brother?" Peter's ears heard his name, and his heart misbehaved. He lifted a hand. "It is Peter," he said, in the voice you use when calling to birds. Matilda turned at the sound. For a heartbeat he had the strange thought that the river had waited for this exact moment, that the water itself paused to listen. Her eyes found him and seemed to register not just his face but the life that had chiseled it in the city. The squared shoulders, the careful hair, the shirt whose buttons were determined not to be lost to careless laundries. Her look was not a question. It was an assessment, like a trader's thumb on a tomato. Then she looked away, as if reminding everyone that she owed nothing to curiosity. Perez, unwilling to let silence own the water, paddled closer until the canoe drifted near the girls like a lazy visitor. "We are setting traps at the lily pond," he said. "If the fish hear Peter's English, they will surrender." Stella laughed. "Let them surrender into my pot," she said. "Matilda, greet them like a Christian." Matilda glanced at Peter again, and this time he saw the spark that tried to hide behind dignity. "Good morning," she said, and her voice had the kind of calm that pretends it does not know the word tremble. "Good morning," Peter echoed. "I just returned." "So we can see," Matilda said, and adjusted her headscarf, which had not asked to be adjusted. "Fada has a way of announcing its prodigal sons." Perez threw his hands up in mock surrender. "Ah, we are prodigal. Forgive us our city sins." Stella cocked her head at Peter. "You are taller, Peter. Some of these Fada girls like height. Some of these Fada boys like trouble." Perez shot back. Matilda drew the net in and shook out a single wriggling fish that flashed like a tossed coin. She studied it and then lowered it into a wicker basket. "We will talk later," she said, addressing the water more than the men. "At the playground. By evening." The words were for all and for one. Perez raised his eyebrows in a silent hail to the gods of luck. Peter tried to nod without looking like a man who had just been fed fufu after a long fast. "Evening, then," he managed. They parted on the river's breath. As Perez and Peter paddled away, Perez nearly fell laughing. "Did you see how she said it? At the playground. By evening. Like a headmistress scheduling punishment." Peter pretended to splash him. "Leave it. Some words carry themselves with style." But his chest felt like a drum warming by a small fire. They set their traps at the lily pond where dragonflies wrote invisible letters on the air. Perez talked about everything. Goats who developed bad manners during the flood and had to be flogged with grammar. The new catechist who pronounced amen as if chewing rope. The boy who swore a crocodile winked at him. Peter half listened and half traveled in his mind to evening. The island had a playground that was not really a playground. Just a sandy clearing ringed by palms and gossip, with a wooden swing that squeaked like a mouse with complaints. Children used it by day. By evening, lovers borrowed it and the island pretended not to see. By afternoon, the sun became a well-meaning tyrant, inspecting everything in detail. Peter and Perez hauled their modest catch back to shore, walking the last shallow length with trousers rolled to their knees. A woman passing by with a baby tied to her back clucked at them. "City boys," she said, jerking her chin toward Peter. "They will put your heart in their pocket, you hear? It is safe there, Mama?" Perez asked with exaggerated politeness. "Nothing is safe where pockets live," she said, but her eyes smiled. At the compound, Mama Ebicabo inspected the fish as if selecting words from a dictionary, chose two, and threw them back into the basin. "For luck," she said. "We must give the river something to gossip about." Peter bathed by the back of the house, pouring water over himself from a blue plastic bowl. The water was cool, the kind that forgives you for leaving and weighs you down with gratitude when you return. He scrubbed city fatigue from his skin and felt Fada's quiet climb back into his bones. Evening put a red scarf around the island. The playground's palms became slim shadows guarding a secret. Children had gone home. The swing held its peace. The breeze arrived without shoes. Peter reached early, because some meetings require forgiveness for time. He stood and looked at nothing, then sat and watched the swing, then stood again as if to prove he could. She came with Stella, of course. In Fada, arriving with a friend was both a defense and a tradition. Matilda wore a white blouse that made night think about brightness. She carried herself with the history of knowing that when she walked, people adjusted their sentences. Stella had her easy laugh in her eyes, which were curious first and kind later. "You are early," Matilda said. "Habit of schools," Peter replied. "They punish lateness with mathematics." "Then it is a good habit," Stella said. "Unless you marry a woman who likes to make an entrance." Perez arrived moments later with his own swagger and a calabash of palm wine carried like a trophy. "I cannot allow conversation to be dry," he declared. He poured into small enamel cups. Stella took hers. Matilda refused, not because of the drink, but because refusal is a useful tool. Peter accepted and sipped. It tasted like trees keeping secrets. "So," Matilda said, sitting on the swing and letting it scold softly under her weight. "You finished school." "I did," Peter answered. "I came back to help my father and to think." "What are you thinking?" Stella asked. "About staying," Peter said. "About what a man owes the place that taught him the names of birds before the names of buses." Matilda's smile was small. "A man owes himself first," she said. "Then he can distribute the change." Perez whistled. "See philosophy. Where did you learn it?" "Port Harcourt," Matilda said dryly, and Stella coughed to hide a laugh. Peter studied her, the certain set of her chin, the quickness of her eyes, the way her fingers knotted and unknotted the string at the hem of her blouse when she thought no one saw. "Have you been?" he asked gently. She looked away toward the river's dark suggestion. "Not yet," she said. "But soon. I have no intention of wasting my youth on villagers who count the same waves every day. I will go where the waves are buses and the buses run at night." Stella tilted her head. "You and your buses, Matilda. The last time you climbed one to Worry, you vomited and swore that travel is a disease." "That was a bad day," Matilda retorted, but her cheeks remembered and warmed. "Besides, Port Harcourt is not Worry." "True," Perez agreed. "Port Harcourt is Port Harcourt, and Fada is Fada, and a fish is a fish until Pepper teaches it humility." They all laughed, the laughter you laugh when you are young and words still behave as toys in your mouth. But beneath the laughter was a careful weaving, threads thrown and caught, little knots tied when attention blinked. "You have many suitors," Peter said, not as a question but as a fact that the island had already told him. Matilda rolled her eyes with deliberate grace. "Men who think a goat is a bouquet," she said, "and men who spell love with motorbikes and horns. They speak as if I am an address, and they have the correct number." "And you?" Peter asked. "What do you speak?" "I speak Port Harcourt," she said. "Freedom. Money that does not smell like fish. Rooms with ceilings that do not leak ideas into your hair." Stella sighed. "She also speaks dream. And sometimes dream and freedom quarrel." "I am only saying what I want," Matilda snapped softly. "Is that a sin?" "No," Peter said. "But sometimes wanting speaks louder than listening." She met his gaze. A moth danced foolishly around the swing rope, courting the one lantern they had brought. "You are a listener, then?" she asked. "I am trying to be," he said. "The city taught me how to talk. Fada is teaching me how to hear." Stella clapped once. "That is a line," she announced. "He has lines." Matilda, careful. "City boys carry lines in their pockets like currency." "Maybe," Matilda said, and the word was a door left deliberately ajar. "But even a city boy must prove he is not only visiting." Perez, sensing that the conversation had narrowed to a point that did not require his chisel, stepped back and sipped his palm wine. The river continued its quiet argument with the shore. Somewhere, a woman called a child's name 3 times, as if names grow taller with repetition. Matilda stood, the swing complaining and then forgiving. She looked at Peter as a general studies the map of a country she intends to enter. If the river was generous to Peter's return, the playground became the silent witness to a budding romance whose roots tangled deeper than Fada's tallest mangrove. It started with laughter, quick and nervous, under the flaring shadows of palm trees. Each evening, Peter and Matilda found themselves drawn to the sandy playground, claiming a rickety wooden swing as their confessional. Children surrendered the clearing as twilight bled across the sky, leaving behind only whispers and the scent of wild hibiscus. There, Matilda let down her guard. She giggled at Peter's city stories, of buses packed like sardine tins, of street hawkers chanting in 3 languages at once, of the city night that never truly slept. In return, Matilda confessed her own rebellion. How she dreamt of Port Harcourt's neon, of newness, of escape from the island's endless rhythm. "You're not like the others," she said once, swinging slow, toes grazing sand. "You don't talk as if the island is all the world." Peter chuckled, brushing a mosquito from his neck. "Sometimes I wish I could fit into this world as easily as a canoe fits the river. But I have too many edges." Matilda reached for his hand, and the river breeze hushed, as if not to interrupt. The affair bloomed in secret. They met behind the yam sheds, in the quiet of early dawn, at the playground where laughter could pretend to be only that, laughter. But secrets in Fada Island are like fish caught in shallow water. They don't stay hidden for long. Within weeks, the whispers began. Auntie Alero, who claimed to hear everything through her kitchen window, told the fish sellers at the jetty, who told the canoe boys, who told the palm wine tapper. By the next market day, it seemed the entire island had tasted the story. Matilda has finally caught herself a man. Who? The city boy? That one will confuse her head. She wants city life. She'll end up in city walla. The elders, gathered under the baobab, cheeks full of kola nut, shook their heads and swapped proverbs. "When a fish dances on dry land, it invites the hawk," muttered old Reby. Stella, loyal friend and reluctant conspirator, watched the affair with anxious eyes. She cornered Matilda by the water one morning, hands on her hips, voice trembling with urgency. "Why do you rush, Tilda? The world is bigger than this, yes, but it is not always kinder. City boys have city ways. What if you lose yourself?" Matilda laughed, but the sound was brittle, like the crack of a snail's shell. "I am not a goat, Stella. No one can lead me where I don't want to go. But hearts don't ask permission to break," Stella whispered. Matilda only rolled her eyes, her gaze fixed on the river's restless curve. But fate, like the river's current, rarely flows where one expects. The first sign came with the heavy silence in Matilda's laughter, the way her steps slowed, how she started to hide behind bright wrappers and a practiced smile. Then the rumor arrived as all rumors do in Fada, on the lips of a drunken fisherman, shouted across the night fire. "Matilda is with child. City boy has sown a river seed." The gossip flared like wildfire. At the market, women eyed her belly, clicking their tongues. At church, the preacher's eyes lingered on her in sermons about daughters of Zion who wander. Even Pa Ebikabo, usually tight-lipped, muttered to Peter, "Manhood is not in trousers, my son, but in how you wear your shame." Peter, young, confused, half proud and half terrified, stood by Matilda. He declared his intent to marry, to take responsibility. His mother sobbed in equal measure for pride and worry. His father carved an extra paddle, as if fatherhood meant more canoes to man. Matilda said little. Her eyes, once alive with dreams, dulled beneath the weight of expectation. As her belly swelled, she grew distant, her laughter rarer, her touch hesitant. "Are you afraid?" Peter asked her once, watching as she sat on the mud porch, rubbing her stomach with absent fingers. She shrugged, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I thought love would taste like freedom, but it is thick like river mud after the flood. Heavy." The baby came in the heart of the rainy season, a girl, red as new yam, lungs strong enough to silence even the oldest gossips. They named her Rose, after the wildflowers that grew untamed along the banks. Peter cradled her, overwhelmed by a joy that threatened to split his chest. He dreamed of new beginnings, of teaching his daughter to paddle, to laugh at the world, to be both island and city at once. But Matilda looked at the child with wary eyes, as if Rose were an anchor and not a miracle. Freedom, for Matilda, became a memory she could not swallow. Days blurred into sleepless nights. The baby's cries grated against her nerves. The heavy duties of motherhood pressed down like river stones. She watched her friends, Stella among them, dance, flirt, and gossip beneath the mango trees, free as birds, while she felt caged. Bitterness bloomed. She grew restless, irritable, snapping at Peter for imagined slights. She started leaving Rose with him, at first for an hour, then for afternoons, then entire nights. "Take her," she would say, thrusting the wriggling bundle into his arms as he returned from the river, sweat still drying on his brow. "I am too young to rot in this village. Let me breathe, Peter." He pleaded, tried to reason, but Matilda would only scoff and vanish for days, returning with city plans in her eyes and no apology on her lips. Villagers began to notice. See how the city woman abandons her child," they whispered as Peter walked the footpaths with Rose strapped to his back. "Father by day, mother by night. Does she think babies are palm wine calabashes to be dropped and collected at will?" The humiliation gnawed at Peter. At church, at market, even at the riverside, eyes followed him, half sympathy, half judgment. Once, after a particularly public scene, Matilda storming off, shouting, leaving the baby crying at his feet, Peter sat by the water's edge, heart raw. "Why do you let her shame you?" asked Perez, voice gentle. "Why don't you send her away?" Peter only shook his head. "She is not evil, Perez. She is just lost. But loss, when it comes, is often as sudden as a river's rage." It was a morning thick with the smell of rain, the river swollen and swift. Peter had barely slept. Rose had fussed all night, teething and feverish. He cradled her at the jetty, waiting for the medicine woman, when Matilda appeared, eyes wild, wrapper askew. Without a word, she pressed the baby into his arms. "I can't do this," she hissed. "I need my life back. Let the river raise her if it must." She turned to leave, but Peter snapped, grief, exhaustion, humiliation fusing into one desperate act. He looked at the bundle in his arms, at the accusing stares of fishermen, at the endless water. In that flash, a moment the river would never return, he flung Rose into the churning current. There was a gasp, Stella's scream from across the jetty, the shriek of a startled egret, and the world collapsed into the roar of water. Peter stood frozen, the cries of villagers ringing in his ears, hands still open, as if expecting the baby to return like a thrown paddle. But the river took her, sweeping her away, far from Fada's shame. Yet fate was not done with Rose, nor with those who threw her away. Downstream, where the river broadened and slowed, a solitary canoe drifted, a stately craft owned by Madame Rosa, the widow with silver-threaded hair and eyes sharp as a hawk's. She had lost 2 sons to the city, but her heart remained soft for lost causes. That morning, Rosa was harvesting water lilies when she heard a faint cry, thin, desperate, but alive. She followed the sound and spotted the baby, pale and near lifeless, tangled among the lilies. With hands steadier than time, Rosa scooped Rose from the water, wrapping her in warm cloths and pressing her close. The baby shivered, then wailed, a furious, beautiful sound. Rosa whispered a prayer of thanks. A child from the river is a gift, not a curse. She took Rose to her home in Fara Island, 10 villages downstream. There, she nursed the baby back to health, calling her Victoria for victory over death, but always Rose in moments of softness. She poured into Rose the love she had stored for years. Lullabies sung in moonlight, stories of fish who turned into birds, lessons on how to hold a paddle and mend a net, how to read and, eventually, how to dream of more than even Fara could offer. Back in Fada, the scandal festered, but time moved as rivers do, onward, sometimes forgetting, sometimes forgiving. Peter and Matilda parted, each burdened by the shadow of what they had done. Neither knew that the child they had abandoned would one day return, grown, strong, and destined to judge them not with anger, but with the unyielding love of a river that never forgets. The currents carried Rose toward her fate, while Fada's whispers faded, waiting for the day when secrets would rise to the surface, shimmering in the morning sun. If the river knows how to forget, it does not show its secret to Fara Island. Madame Rosa, the oldest daughter of the river's memory, woke before dawn each day. Her house, a bright patchwork of woven mats and zinc, perched near the water's bend, smelled of smoke, palm oil, and clean air. Widowed for 10 years, Rosa made her name as a fisherwoman and healer. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, missed nothing. Some called her the river's wife, for she rescued the lost, mended broken canoes, and told fortunes to those brave enough to pay her in fresh fish and silence. On the day she found the river child, Rosa was searching for water lilies. Her canoe drifted softly, the paddle trailing circles through the morning mist. As she bent to cut a lily, she heard it, a thin, hungry cry carried by the river's cold hand. Rosa's heart skipped. She leaned out, careful, and saw her, a tiny, exhausted baby, half wrapped in tattered cloth, clinging to life between the roots of a floating water hyacinth. "God of the waters," Rosa whispered. With arms stronger than grief, she reached and lifted the child. The baby shivered, lips blue, eyes closed in defeat, but when Rosa pressed her against her own chest, the child gasped, then wailed, a sharp, defiant sound that sliced the morning in two. Rosa took her home, dried her, rubbed her with warm shea butter, and wrapped her in a bright wrapper. Victoria Rose, she named her, in honor of the river's victory and the wildflowers that refused to die. The villagers gathered at Rosa's door, as they always did when mystery and gossip arrived together. Some claimed the child was a curse, others a blessing. Old Pa Sikai, who had seen 3 floods and 5 chiefs, spat on the ground and said, "That child carries a story. Watch how fate remembers those who forget." But Rosa, who had lost her own sons to the city's temptations, would not let go. She raised Rose with a fierce and gentle love, singing lullabies from the river, teaching her to swim before she could talk, telling her the secrets of fish, plants, and the silent ways of water. Rose grew quickly. By 4, she was mending nets better than most men. By 8, she could tell the difference between the laughter of a kingfisher and the warning of a crocodile. Rosa sent her to school, bartering fish and herbal roots for textbooks and pencils. Rosa's mind, sharp as a hook, devoured everything: maths, science, stories of faraway lands. Rosa often watched her from the porch, pride softening her old eyes. "You are the river's second chance," she would say. "Let no one tell you you are less." While Rose bloomed in Farah, fate tugged hard on the 2 who had cast her away. Peter left Fada Island not long after the scandal. The shame, heavy as a sodden net, weighed him down. He tried to patch things with Matilda, but her bitterness had grown thorns. She blamed Peter for her lost dreams and herself for her lost freedom. She too left, slipping away in the night with a borrowed bag and city dreams still burning like fever. Peter drifted first to Warri, then farther, taking jobs as a dockhand, a vendor, a bus conductor, anything to keep his mind busy and his belly quiet. He sent money to his parents when he could, but home became a place of ghosts. The city's promise soured for him. The river haunted his dreams. He often woke sweating, heart hammering, certain he heard a baby's cry threading the city's midnight noise. Matilda's journey was little better. Port Harcourt, for all its lights, offered her only the shadow of her hopes. She tried to sell wares, then herself. Men promised her many things, but she soon learned that a city's kindness is often thin as a wrapper in harmattan. She returned once to Fada, but the village closed its heart to her. So she moved from place to place, searching, always searching. One sticky afternoon in the bustling market at Aleem, fate threw them together. Peter was bargaining for Gary, thin and sunburned, when a familiar voice scolded a meat seller nearby. He turned, and there she was, Matilda, leaner, her hair covered, eyes harder. For a moment, neither spoke. The market's shouts and laughter circled them like a ring of spirits. Finally, Peter managed. "Tilda?" Matilda's lips trembled, then steadied. "So the city could not swallow you after all." He almost smiled, but the sadness between them was too wide. "Are you well?" She shrugged. Well enough for someone who carries nothing but herself. In the hush that followed, a silent truce was struck. They walked the market together, swapping stories of jobs lost, rooms shared, dreams bruised but not broken. Peter, desperate for companionship, suggested marriage. Not out of love, but out of a need for shared survival. "Let us build something new from our ruins," he said, voice almost pleading. Matilda, tired and alone, nodded. "Perhaps together we can teach fate a different song." They found a single-room apartment in the city's outskirts and called it home. For a time, it was enough, 2 outcasts sharing food, hope, and a bed. But happiness, in their hands, was always leaking away. Then came the journey home. It was the harmattan season, dusty winds, red sunrises, coughing that never seemed to end. Word reached Peter that his father had fallen ill. They scraped together bus fare and set out, pressed together in a rickety vehicle with more chickens than people. The bus rattled through villages, past endless rivers, shrines, and red-roofed compounds. People laughed, ate groundnuts, and sang gospel tunes to pass the time. At a crossroads near Ogbia, an old man with a battered Bible climbed on and began to preach. He spoke in the booming, urgent voice of someone who has seen heaven and found it wanting. "My brothers and sisters, let me tell you a truth. There is no escape from yesterday. The river will always remember the child it carried, and the hands that cast it away. Some of you look for blessings in the city, you seek children, riches, rest. Yet your past holds you like a net." A hush fell over the bus. The preacher's eyes swept over the passengers, landing finally on Peter and Matilda. "You too," he thundered. "Yes, you who travel together but sleep with empty arms." Your sorrow, your hunger, your barrenness, they are tied to the child you abandoned by the water. Unless you find that child, unless you seek forgiveness, you will wander all your days, and joy will flee from you. Gasps rippled through the bus. Some crossed themselves. Matilda covered her face. Peter's hands trembled in his lap. The preacher leaned in close, lowering his voice. But hear this, wanderers, the river is merciful. The child is not lost. Seek, and you will find. With that, he hopped off at the next stop, vanishing into the dust like a spirit at dawn. For the rest of the journey, silence pressed upon them. Peter stared at the passing trees, mind racing with shame and fragile hope. Matilda wept quietly, the first time tears had come in many years. As Fada's familiar scent drifted in through the open bus window, smoke, yam, river. Peter took Matilda's hand. "We cannot run anymore," he said, voice raw. "We must find her." Matilda nodded. "If she lives, I will beg at her feet. If she is gone, let the river take me too." And so, burdened with regret and the faint, flickering promise of forgiveness, the two who had cast away their future prepared to search for the daughter who now lived as a stranger in a land they had never known. And in distant Fara Island, Dr. Victoria Rose, child of the river and daughter of Rosa, tended a sick fisherman, her hands sure and gentle. The river's memory flowed through her veins, its lessons written in every touch and every silent promise. What is lost is not always gone. What is thrown away may yet return. The river remembers, and soon it would demand its answer. The preacher's prophecy on the dusty bus haunted Peter and Matilda like an echo they could not silence. That night in Fada, the river seemed louder, restless, whispering secrets through the mangroves. Peter sat outside his parents' house, eyes fixed on the wide, breathing darkness, while Matilda wept quietly on a bamboo mat. At dawn, they made their decision. There would be no rest, no healing, until they found the child. Whether she was alive or dead, whether forgiveness was possible or not, they had to try. With nothing but a worn bag, a bundle of food, and their shame folded between them, they began their search. Fada Island sat like a jewel in the river's palm, surrounded by dozens of smaller fishing and farming settlements. Each village they entered carried its own rhythm. Canoes pulled ashore, women pounding yam under thatched shades, smoke spiraling from fish ovens, children running barefoot through the red dust. But everywhere, their story preceded them. They would kneel before village elders, voice trembling, confessing the unthinkable. "Years ago, we abandoned a child to the river, a girl. We were young, foolish, and broken. Have you heard of her? Have you seen a miracle where the water gave back what it took?" The responses cut in different ways. Some cursed them immediately. "God will not bless the hands that cast away his gift," one old man spat in Ogbekiri. "Even if the river had saved her, why should she want you?" Others, softer, shook their heads in pity. "Suffering blinds people," said a palm wine tapper in Ekiti. "You have carried your punishment already. Keep searching." But there were also those who laughed openly, mocking their journey. "Ah, so the city lovers returned to hunt the baby they threw like broken calabash," a woman jeered in Oyabu. "Maybe she's a mermaid now, waiting to drag you into the deep." Every reaction carved a new wound, but they pressed on. 10 villages, 20, 30. Their sandals wore thin, their feet cracked, their voices hoarse from repeating the same plea. It was in Abunoma, the 10th village beyond Fada, where hope finally stirred. They sat under the shade of a giant almond tree, exhausted, when an elderly fisherman wandered by, carrying a basket of fresh tilapia. "You seek a river child?" he asked, squinting at them. Peter's breath caught. "Yes, Baba. Please, we are told she lives." The man rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Many floods ago, the river spat out a baby downstream at Fara Island. Madame Rosa found her, they say. Raised her as her own." Matilda gasped, clutching Peter's hand so tightly her nails dug into his skin. "Fara Island," Peter whispered, as though tasting salvation for the first time. Fara was not far as the egret flies, but the river twisted like an old tale reluctant to end. They boarded a weathered canoe, joining other travelers along the winding current. The journey felt heavy with unseen eyes watching. The mangroves whispered, the herons scattered at their passing, and somewhere a crocodile slid into the water without a sound. Matilda sat silent, her fingers restless on her lap, while Peter stared at the horizon, his jaw clenched like a man preparing to meet his judge. By dusk, Fara emerged, a lively settlement perched on raised wooden platforms above the riverbanks. Canoes clustered like sleeping fish, while palm fronds danced lazily in the breeze. Smoke from fish ovens curled into the evening sky, carrying the familiar, bittersweet scent of home and hunger. Madame Rosa's compound was easy to find. Everyone in Farah knew her name. She was respected, a healer, a trader, and as fate had arranged, the guardian of the river's child. When Peter and Matilda arrived, Rosa sat outside weaving a fish basket, her silver-threaded hair glowing in the dying light. At the sight of them, her eyes narrowed into slits of steel. "We seek your mercy," Peter began, bowing low, voice trembling. Rosa's hands stilled, but her anger came swift. "Mercy," she hissed. "Do you ask mercy when you threw your flesh into the river like refuse? You left her to die, but the river chose her instead. You lost that right the day you chose freedom over blood." Matilda fell to her knees, sobs breaking free. "Mama, forgive us. I was young, foolish. I thought the child would chain me, but she was my blessing." Rosa stood, tall despite her age, her voice rising like a wave. "Blessing? You speak of blessing now, when I nursed her fevers, taught her to walk, stayed awake when she cried through storms? Where were you when she called for a mother? Where was your heart?" Her voice carried through the compound, drawing curious neighbors to the fence. Whispers rose like evening cicadas. "So these are the ones, the river parents." Peter knelt beside Matilda, tears soaking the earth. "Please, Mama Rosa, let us see her. Let us ask forgiveness, not as parents, but as sinners who wronged both child and river." For a long, tense silence, Rosa stared at them. Then, slowly, the hardness in her eyes softened, but only slightly. "She is no longer yours," Rosa said coldly. "Her name is Victoria Rose. She is my daughter, my pride, my answer from God. I will not force her to see you, but I will take you to her. If she chooses to forgive, it is her right. If she sends you away, you will leave and never return." Peter bowed his head, whispering gratitude through trembling lips. Matilda clung to Rosa's feet, kissing the dust-stained hem of her wrapper. Before dawn the next day, Rosa led them across the river by canoe. The ride was silent except for the paddles slicing water and the distant chorus of frogs. Farah fell behind them. Ahead, a bustling riverside town loomed. Glass buildings rising beyond the mangroves, where Madame Rosa's daughter worked as a doctor. Matilda's heart pounded as they approached the hospital gates. Peter's palms sweated despite the cool river breeze. Inside the reception, Rosa turned to them. "Wait here," she ordered. "I will fetch her." Minutes crawled by like wounded crabs. Matilda clutched Peter's hand so tightly he felt his pulse in his fingertips. The muffled sounds of patients, nurses, and machinery faded into the background as their entire world shrank into a single corridor leading to their daughter's door. Then came footsteps, soft but certain. Dr. Victoria Rose stepped into the hallway, radiant in a crisp white coat, stethoscope resting lightly around her neck. Her eyes, Rosa's strength and the river's memory combined, fell on Peter and Matilda, and in that instant time slowed. She did not speak. Matilda opened her mouth, but no words came, only sobs that shook her whole body. Peter bowed his head so deeply his forehead touched the cold floor tiles. Rose turned to Rosa. "Who are they?" "They are the ones," Rosa said simply, her voice neither kind nor cruel. "The river gave them a child. They gave her back." A hush fell, heavy as deep water. Would she forgive? Would she turn away? The answer, the turning of fate's tide, lay in the silence stretching between them. The hallway felt colder than the river at dawn. Peter's knees trembled as he knelt, forehead nearly brushing the hospital's polished tiles. Beside him, Matilda clung to her wrapper, shaking with silent sobs. In front of them stood Dr. Victoria Rose, the child they had once abandoned, now a woman shaped by resilience and love. She was striking. Her white coat gleamed under the fluorescent lights, her stethoscope glinting like a medal of honor. There was grace in her posture, calm in her expression, but her eyes, dark, steady, unblinking, held the unspoken weight of the river's memory. Matilda tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Rose, my daughter." Rose raised a hand, firm but gentle. "Please don't call me that. I am Dr. Victoria Rose." The correction struck Matilda like an arrow. She collapsed fully to her knees, crying openly. Peter's breath came ragged, his chest heaving as though the guilt of 10 years pressed down all at once. The heartbreaking plea. Madame Rosa, standing nearby like a silent guardian, folded her arms. Her face bore neither anger nor pride, only caution, like one watching a storm decide its path. Peter finally found his voice, though it trembled like a broken paddle on strong currents. "We came to beg forgiveness," he whispered. We were young, foolish, blind to blessings. We thought we wanted freedom, but we lost everything when we lost you. Matilda clutched her chest, words tumbling like waves breaking on rocks. I was afraid, my child. I thought motherhood would chain me. I thought the city had better dreams. But the river gave you to us, and we betrayed it, and you. The hallway quieted, except for the distant murmur of nurses and the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor somewhere deep inside the ward. Rose's gaze remained fixed on Rose, but she said nothing. Rose stood still, her hands clasped before her. Her silence was heavier than words, thicker than judgment. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, almost too calm. Do you know what it means to grow up without answers? To hear whispers that you came from the water, that your bloodline abandoned you. Peter buried his face in his palms. Matilda crawled closer, clutching the hem of Rose's coat. Please forgive us, we are already dead inside. Rose stepped back slightly, her expression unreadable. For a long, fragile moment, it seemed she might turn away entirely. But then Rose inhaled deeply, as if steadying herself against her own storm. I forgive you, she said finally. Matilda gasped, eyes wide with gratitude. Peter sobbed quietly, shoulders shaking. But before relief could fully settle, Rose's next words fell like stones into still water. I forgive you, but I do not return to you. You are not my parents. Madame Rosa is my mother, the one who pulled me from the river, who held me when you let me drown. She turned to Rosa, her eyes softening like sunlight breaking through mist. Everything I am, everything I have become, is because of her. Rosa's lips trembled slightly, pride and pain tangled in her expression. She rested a hand on Rosa's shoulder, her silent presence louder than any declaration. Matilda cried out, reaching again desperate. But we gave you life, Rose. Rose's gaze snapped back, sharp as the flash of a fishhook under sunlight. And then you threw it away. The words echoed, final and unshakable. Peter pulled Matilda back gently, tears streaming freely down his own face. He knew then what she was too broken to admit. This was not a reunion. This was an ending, and a beginning they could not enter. Madame Rosa finally spoke, her voice low but edged with steel. I will not forbid her from forgiving you. That is between her and God. But do not mistake forgiveness for restoration. You buried your right to call her yours the day you cast her to the current. She looked at them, tired, worn, older than their years, and sighed. Go back to Fada. Begin again if you can. Leave the child to the mother the river chose. Matilda collapsed into Peter's arms, wailing softly. He held her, his own strength fraying. Rose turned away, unable to watch them any longer. They left Fara the next morning, silent and hollow. The canoe ride home felt endless, the river stretching like eternity itself. The water whispered beneath them, mocking, forgiving, remembering. Villagers along the banks watched curiously, sensing the heaviness that clung to them like damp clothes. Perez met them at the dock, running to greet his old friend, but stopped short when he saw their faces. They found her, someone murmured behind him. Yes, another whispered, but the river didn't return her. Perez tried to speak, but Peter only placed a hand on his shoulder, shaking his head. The story needed no telling. Fada already knew. Back in their small compound, life moved around them but not through them. Children played along the riverbank. Women argued over Gary prices. Men shouted about fuel shortages. But Peter and Matilda moved like shadows, swallowed by their own regret. At night, Peter would sit by the river, staring into its endless blackness. Sometimes, in the hush between frog calls, he swore he heard a baby's cry ripple across the surface, carried by the same current that once took his daughter. Matilda, restless, wandered the paths she had once run as a carefree girl. But the world she had longed for, the city, the lights, the freedom, no longer called to her. All she wanted now was the chance to undo one irreversible moment. It never came. The river does not forget. The child you cast away today may return tomorrow, not to embrace you, but to remind you of what was lost. Peter and Matilda sought freedom and found emptiness. They searched for redemption and touched forgiveness. But forgiveness is not always restoration. In Fada, people say the water carries stories to the ocean and back. Some return as blessings, some as judgment, and some, like the current beneath your canoe, will haunt you until the day your paddle stills. Dr. Victoria Rose stood on the hospital balcony later that evening, watching the river snake toward Fada, its surface kissed by gold from the sinking sun. Beside her, Madame Rosa rested a hand on the railing, silent but steady. Below, Peter and Matilda's canoe drifted slowly away. Two figures bowed beneath the weight of memory. Rose whispered, almost to herself, "I have forgiven them, but I will never forget." The river shimmered beneath her, quiet, endless, patient, holding every secret, every choice, every story. And somewhere deep within its current, the river smiled. Keep watching and like our videos.